Hi, everyone. I'm Paul Greenberg, and welcome to episode 14 of Talking Headless. As you probably know, this is one of the 11 shows of the PPN Digital Broadcasting Network. Um, what I'm going to do today, I want to go through a little bit of I'll call it ancillary, but it's kind of important housekeeping. This is the last show of the current format, although my guest will be on future shows in the new format. Right. And I want to explain what it's going to look like, starting with episode 15, which will air on May 29th at noon Eastern time. Uh, as you know, right now, what it's been pretty much is me about briefly talking about some market thing that I noticed, and then we go into a guest and we have a conversation about something. This is called Talking Headless. I am an analyst and an advisor and things like that. So I wanted to, because I'm an analyst, I also wanted to talk to you about the business of being an analyst and the business of analyst relations. So what I'm going to do going forward, the show will be something like this. One, of course, we'll have our lovely little intro with that great little rock tune you hear. Then I'm going to do 5 to 7 minutes of uh, kind of the welcome, and then I'm going to go into something market related. It could be a specific company, it could be a trend I think is full of horse, you know what. It could be something that is exciting that I think you got to get rid of the hype and look at the use cases. It could be a specific use case that I found really fascinating. It could be a piece of technology I thought was really interesting, but something that as an analyst I would do. More than likely, it'll be about a company. All right. Then I'm going to have a segment, and this is really a new segment. It's kind of inspired by the episode we did, I think it was episode 11, maybe, with Robin Schaefer, who is, of course, an analyst relations person. I'm going to have a segment where we interview an AR person, where we have a conversation with an analyst relations person. I already have my guest for that. She's already committed. It'll be Sandy Lowe from Zoho. You couldn't do any better. My guest already in the green room nodded like this when he heard the name, because it's just like, of course it would be. And you'll understand why when you listen to what she's got to say. And then the final segment will be an analyst, one of the analysts out there, and he and I, or she and I, will be talking about something. Whatever we decide we want to talk about that day, we'll give you a little notice on what that might be. And if it interests you, you'll listen. And then we go, of course, into the outro. And the reason I bring that up is because, as you know, if you watched the show before, it's got a cat in it, right? So that's pretty much how it's going to look. Look, what I would appreciate, watch the show, give me feedback on even just, or take what I just said, give me feedback on the idea. Do I think you're really going to do that? No, I'm not that stupid. Most of the time I don't get feedback, even if I ask for it. But it would really be appreciated if you happen to do it. All right. So with that, let's get to our guest. I'm going to tell you some stories about this gentleman. Look, I love him because he lives in New York City, of course, and he's a Mets fan, even though, of course, I'm a Yankees fan. He's a Knicks fan, which is, of course, awesome. And he is truly, and I am not joking here, one of the most wonderful people I know. And he's genuinely a wonderful human being. He cares about others at a level. If you want a human definition of empathy, this is probably the guy, right? Not only that, he's kind of the embodiment of both of the new segments that I'm going to have, right? On the one hand, when he was at Freshworks, he ran, among other things, because there's more evangelist and corporate communications, both there, really, outreach, right? Market strategy, that was kind of him. He ran AR, right? And look, to be perfectly honest, I didn't love Freshworks. I still don't love Freshworks, but I loved him. And as long as he was at Freshworks, I would do anything for Freshworks he asked, right? Because he's that great a human being. Since that time, he's been an analyst. He's an advisor. He's still an evangelist for the ideas he believes strong. He's a thought leader. And in fact, one of the places he's a thought leader is in one of the most difficult places for a company to really do well, which is corporate narrative, right? Here's the deal. When I met him, I was at a Pivot conference. Brian Solis had asked me to come speak. We got Alan and I give away his name. He and I got together. We talked, and I was smitten that day. I really was. And now, since that time, I've also gotten to know his kids and his wife and their extraordinary family. And I'm going to tell you something. If you've ever watched the other show I do with Kenny Lauer, EWPK, you'll know that you might guess who it is if you've seen this. This gentleman has twin daughters. They're 22 years old. And by the age of 22, they have already, created, written the music for, written the book for, written the lyrics for, cast, produced, directed, and sang a song cycle that was already presented in a theater. And we had the two of them, Olivia and Amanda. I'm not going to give you the last names yet. Olivia and Amanda on to talk about this accomplishment on EWPK, and it was extraordinary. And even though I had problems trying to figure out what to do with the buttons of StreamYard, they, like the troopers they are, at the end of the show, they sang, right, and laughed while they were singing because I couldn't get it straight. Anyway, this gentleman, his name is Alan Berkson. He's one of the best humans I know, and now I'm going to bring him on so you can find that out for yourself.
I think that everyone who hears your introductions are flattered and embarrassed at the same time, Paul.
That's all my intent completely.
Thank you for that. That was fantastic.
So, Alan, look, I mean, you're literally, as I've said, well, I actually didn't even say this, but you happen to be one of the most astute people I know. You're very aware of the marketplace as it's evolving. You're also aware of what composes the value proposition for a company and what it takes for a contemporary, let's call it, customer experience to be somewhere between good and great, because nothing can be great all the time, and the employee experience equally. I want to start there because I think a lot of the vendors that I deal with, although they're getting better, to their credit, still think of customer experience as it was, or employee experience as it was, say, 7-8 years ago. Not that that's horrible or anything, but it's not appropriate to 2024. Well, can you talk about what a contemporary customer experience and employee experience looks like in this era?
So from a customer experience point of view, I actually have a quote from you in my head, which is, when the ordinary fails, that's when you have a problem. Extraordinary is great, but the ordinary should work. And that goes for customer experience and employee experience. And I think there's an overemphasis on your favorite term, delight, or wowing, and no, I agree with you. And I think what we're seeing, especially what I'm seeing with a lot of startups, because I do talk to a lot of startups, is how do we use what we know about whether it's our customers or employees and help them better at their moment of need. One of my favorite quotes is also from your friend of mine, Michael Mose. And he said, from a customer experience point of view, you should know what you know about me and use it for our mutual benefit. And it's simple. I mean, we've been collecting data for a long time. We have systems of record. We have third-party data that we can add to it and enrich it. And now the question is, can we actually make sense of it more than just demographics or generalizations about who the customer is?
Before I get to the next part of this, the only way I'd look at delight these days is, hey, can you turn on delight? That's it, right? And just to emphasize the point.
Yeah, well, from a customer experience point of view, there's the different touch points, whether it's a marketing touch point, whether it's a sales touch point, whether it's a customer service touch point. One of my favorite guiding principles from a customer service point of view comes from a gentleman who was the head of a telco in Canada who said, my job is to get you back to doing what you were doing before you called me because you didn't want to call me in the first place.
I want to meet that guy.
And it's the same thing, I think, in all of the touch points, which is, can you be part of the process and move it forward as opposed to trying to show off? I see a lot of people talk about hyper-personalization. I get hyper-personalization on my Facebook ads, but they show me stuff after I've bought it to buy more of the same thing. That's hyper-personalization, but that's not value.
Well, to be honest, there's no difference between hyper-personalization. Look, if you think of it this way, there's personalization, which is the same damn thing as hyper-personalization. Because if you be actually doing what's called personalization, that is what hyper-personalization is. Meaning, you are doing something that, let's call it, is striking enough to the individual that it intrigues them to do something further. Right. That's pretty much it. And now the term that I'm starting to use a little more, I used humanization for a while, but I now have kind of shifted how I'm using the term, but I moved it to individualization. If you want to get down to a real level of singularity with a customer. That said, honestly, do I ever think that true individualization is going to be achieved? No, I don't. There's too much that people don't tell you and never will tell you, or there's too many things that are out of context that you see in a social conversation, let's say, that a company can't possibly either ever know it, or even if there was a way to know it, they probably couldn't afford to spend the money to know it. So to the point you made about Michael Moses' quote, that's the right way to think about it. So here's my question, though, because given that we have this incredible amount of technology now with AI and everything else, but even beforehand, but we're still dealing, if you're viewing things from the standpoint of your, let's call it your historic CRM system, you're dealing with a system of record, which tends to be pretty passive and static. What kind of system, now we have CDPs, which depending on how you want to view them, they're either marketing specific data or they're generalized data, but ultimately they're active in at least as close to real time as you really get. How does that get applied so that if I'm active on a site somewhere, you have a way to respond to me while I'm still active on that site in a way that I want to continue that conversation? How does that happen?
I remember when Salesforce came out with Genie. That was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And the point of Genie was Salesforce had a CRM. Salesforce had a CDP, but the CDP was static and not for performance. It was for analysis and insights. So they had to come up with a layer to basically say, I'm going to take an image from the CDP and I'm going to enrich it with real-time information to get up to basically help deliver a better experience. That's and I think that's that's really what you should be thinking about as you're thinking about employee experiences, not just historically, what do I know about this customer and I'm going to make the experience. I need to also make it contextual for what they're doing now. Traditional CDPs don't do that. And traditional, certainly not the CRM, because you don't have enough data, because it's just one piece of the customer view. There's lots of other touch points, whether it's in your e-commerce system or or your customer service system or wherever it is. You have different touch points on the customer. So the biggest challenge or what companies should be thinking about now is, how do I bring a real-time view of what my customer is thinking at this moment of need. That's the term I've been using, this moment of need, where maybe it's a moment of decision, maybe it's a moment of a purchase, point of purchase, whatever it is, so that I can help them make a better decision and they can help themselves make a better decision at that point.
Interestingly enough, if I'm looking at traditional systems of record, basically, the way analysis got done was pretty much the equivalent of, I'm not trying to absolutely equate this to batch processing, right? Meaning, okay, you gather the data, it sits there, then you run the analysis, it tells you something. As opposed to, okay, the data keeps coming and you're running analysis as close to continually as you can on it so that you're able to return something back. I remember when Thunderhead first came out, when I first saw it, that was the thing that blew me away, is that they were responding to customer as they were literally on their journeys, either at a meta level or mega level or a micro level, in real time, really. And so that, historically that means, okay, would you like to buy this? Right. But, as time has evolved and especially with now the use of AI, and I'd like your thinking on this, it's more like, okay, would you like to continue this conversation as well as would you like to buy this? So how's that going to impact things? Is that really the case that you're doing that now? How's that going to impact things?
Let's think about it differently. So Amazon, if I go back, I've been using Amazon for over a decade, maybe close to 2, and they have every transaction I've ever done. How much value to them is, or to me, is them knowing what I bought 10 years ago versus what I'm trying to do now? And I think this is a challenge for organizations, is that not all data is created equal, and data has a useful life, just like any other element of the stack, whether it's technology or people skills or processes. And how do we make sure that we're using the data that's going to give most value? And that's, I think it skews towards the real time. I think it skews towards towards the present and more towards real time. And also, can I find similar habits? I'm a Mets fan, and I like to go to theater, and these are all things about me. There are other people like that too, and so maybe there's some value, but again, more recent in terms of being able to correlate what that from that perspective. So we have a lot of data. I think people are concerned with keeping it all. I think maybe it's time to clean house a little bit. I recently moved. I sold my old house. I moved into an apartment. I got rid of a lot of stuff that I thought I needed or I thought I would need someday, but I kind of don't. And I think that's true for companies and their data.
Right. And the data would say you're a pack rat. You were a pack rat, right? So, well, no,
I mean, once a pack rat, always a pack rat.
Oh, I totally agree. I have so much crap in this house that I don't need. But I just don't want to throw it out. I give it away. Like, I'll give away Like Brent and I bought so many damn cameras that we've experimented with for PPN. I've already started giving them away, literally. We're giving them to other shows, right? So, because other than that, I'm running out of room in the house. And this is I think it's 3,300 square foot house. And I'm running out of room to keep things. Comes with being
so Paul, let me just go back, because there's one aspect of the data that I think is something to think about, particularly in terms of, I'll call it AI. I know that people have lots of terms for it. Let's call it AI or automation. One thing that the data serves is to help power automation. If something happened before, if there's a situation that happened before and we know what the next step is because we've done it before and it's documented, then automation can handle it. And so we should think about the data that helps power automation, because that's part of scale. That helps me do more transactions, that help me do more engagements. I can have my conversational engagement. But the key piece is, okay, now where does the humans fit into that? And they're handling things that never happened before. It's probably very complicated or complex. I think you've heard me tell my story about simple, complicated, and complex. Simple is a recipe. Complicated is parking a car, and complex is raising a child.
Yeah.
All right. And automation can handle simple things. And
raising a child was impossible.
No, just complex.
Okay.
Just complex. And then somebody added a chaotic at the end of it, and I'm not even going into chaotic, but we'll just talk about those three. So simple. Automation can handle simple, and automation can handle some complicated, but very complicated and complex are the domains of humans. So as you're thinking about how you're deploying technology and also the processes, because I think what gets lost in the equation, particularly for vendors, is that they think they can solve a problem with technology and with a tool. And we know it's always the three-legged stool of people, processes, and tools. So let's take a sample. Let's use customer service, for example. You reach out to customer service and you're having a problem with the product. They do an RMA. It's automated. You never have to talk to a person. But you have it. Then you reach out and it's a problem that it's different. You know, you're not sure really what the problem is, or you did a change of address and you're living in, the Caribbean now and they can't figure out how to get it back, whatever it is. So now you talk to a person and that person will solve the problem. This is where organizations are going to make it or break it. They have to normalize that exception. They have to take whatever just happened and have a process where they can normalize that to get it back into the automation so it can happen, so that can be solved the next time that particular exception happens.
So from a vendor perspective, there's a couple of things to say here. So if I go back, let's say 5 years roughly, maybe probably 5 years, Pegasystems began talking about the advent of autonomous service. And, Pega, of course, is known for being, let's call it a business process management heavy company. I mean, that's its purpose, even though it has CRM and engagement and all the other things, and has done a very good job with most of it. Can't say all of it, but most of it. And they began talking about the idea of automation of service. At the time, it was fairly novel, because they had to equate it to autonomous cars and things like that. Which now you don't. Now, fast forward to ServiceNow's conference last week, and Bill McDermott made a huge point of fact. Look, we need to be able to automate all those things in service that can be automated, which is almost all of it, right? It's like probably 80. This is my number, meaningless, no research at all behind it. 80% of it could be automated. The other 20% needs reliance on humans. And with Gen AI, of course, the idea was, and then it can learn another maybe 10% of that. And then the other 10% will always be with humans, basically. And which he didn't put in those terms exactly, but he emphasized it that way in their drive to be a platform of platforms. But here's the interesting question, to me anyway. If we're looking at autonomous service, and let's just assume that it's happened. What is now we're beginning to see is a move toward, and again, ServiceNow brought this up, I'll call it preventative service. I don't know, there's no real name for it. Basically, prevent the problem before it happens. So in other words, if a system is monitoring something that you're doing and it sees, the temperature went up 20 degrees, or, all of a sudden, or this trigger are appearing, and it, as an AI or whatever, would say, well, that means it's likely to go in this direction. Let's reach out to the person and tell them, hey, it looks like you're at the beginnings of this kind of problem. Let's resolve it now. Or we already fixed it. How do you see, first, do you see a future with that in an expanded way, meaning at scale? And secondly, where do you see use cases for that kind of thing initially?
So we're already seeing this on the service management side, on the IT side. I saw ServiceNow demonstrate this at Symposium, maybe 6 or 7 years ago. This idea that, hey, it's self-healing systems. We see you're running out of space. We see that your load on a particular server. Let's spin up a new one. Or something crashes or a router's down. We can automatically route stuff around it. That type of technology exists, but it requires an understanding of where the problems might happen. I think one of the things that we're going to see now with companies who are focused on monitoring and observability is, tell me something I don't know. I think that may be the motto that I will look for as I talk to organizations is, can you tell me something I don't know? Because the other stuff is, if I'm running out of disk space, allocate more. If this queue is too big, empty. Those are all things that I know it's a problem and I can automate the solution. But now tell me, based on what you're seeing, is there a pattern that I'm missing, or is there something that you understand? Tell me something I don't know. And I think that's an opportunity when you have, you can do a bigger analysis on some of the data that you have. On the customer side, it's a little different because you don't want to be creepy. So
by the way,
I think,
saw you open and shut your closet and went to sleep at midnight. And during the night, I noticed that.
Right. Hey, you're getting up 3 times a night,
That's right. you're no, I don't want to go there.
No.
Old Jewish male thing.
Right. So I think from that point of view, being able to, I had this thing when I left Freshworks. I thought, wouldn't it be cool if they could take every email that I've ever sent, every note that I've ever written, every document that I had in Google Drive, or every conversation I've had on Slack, and have that in a knowledge base so that the next person who came in to do my job could have a conversation with, what the person who was there before to get some information. There's I call it legacy knowledge loss through attrition. Every time somebody leaves the company, you're losing undocumented knowledge, and it's implicit knowledge that you'll never recapture. So I think what automation can do, what AI can do, Gen AI, which is essentially a summarization, it can give you the ability to capture some of this information and make it available in different formats than it has before.
All right. So I have one last question on the market side before we get into the other half of this conversation, which is, all right, 3 to 5 years out. Let's say 3 years, because it's hard to predict 5, and even 3 is hard. But 3 years out, where are we with the status of Gen AI, which is a question every analyst has to answer. So where is it?
I don't think we say the word Gen AI.
What do we do? Just nothing?
I think we're talking about it, just like I don't say I don't say Linux. I don't say MySQL. I don't talk about the technologies that are underlying what I use to run my business. And in fact, I'm not even talking about, I don't even own a server. I don't even, so, 30 years ago when I was doing infrastructure, I'd buy a piece of bare metal and I'd have to put an operating system on it, and I'd have to put some software on it, and then I'd have to deploy it and connect it and all that kind of stuff. Nobody's talking about that now. So I don't think we're going to be talking as much about the underlying technology as we will be about the outcomes, which will be, imagine either just having one little box, just like Google made this magic. I have a box and I just type something in and I get a response. It's either just a one box, or it's a Copilot that's sitting on my desk, or it's Jarvis sitting in my ear.
Yep.
That we're not going to be talking about Gen AI.
Gen AI basically is ubiquitous enough to be.
Well, I think it's not even a thing.
No longer be visible.
Well, because it's only one. Look, if you talk to, and I'm sure you've had Michael Wu and others on Gen AI. It's just one implementation, right, of AI, and
absolutely right.
It's expensive. It's resource heavy. And it has its limitations. So we'll be looking at other stuff that, Look, we're already looking at things like RAG, which is this a taking your local resources and then and being able to summarize it using the big LLMs and stuff like that. So we're not going to be talking about Gen AI. We're going to be talking about the outcomes.
Yeah, well, I agree. All right. So this is a subject. You're the master as far as I'm concerned. You and Jeff are the masters, Jeff Gomez, right, are the masters of, which is corporate narrative storytelling, the best I've ever seen. And I'm not saying that because you are my friend and are wonderful. You just really are that. That said, an enormous number of the companies out there are genuinely awful. Or let's reshape. They either have no corporate narrative. They may have a product narrative here and there, like a product story, but they have no corporate narrative, or they have a really, 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 really incomprehensibly bad one. And I mean bad. I'm going to give an example briefly, and you tell me how you would have changed this, actually. So years ago, SAP acquired SuccessFactors. And, SAP acquired them, not, SuccessFactors at the time, which is actually a pretty successful product now, but SuccessFactors at the time was big, but it was bleeding money. But they acquired them as an entryway into the cloud. The problem was at Sapphire that year, they gave the stage to the CEO of SuccessFactors, who told the audience there at the event that on-premises was dead and the cloud was all that mattered. And that's to 30,000 on-premise customers of SAP. SAP took years to overcome the problem that he created because they felt, oh my God, SAP is going to abandon us, right? I mean, 30,000 on-premise. He did no transition, no continuity, nothing. On the other hand, Pega, which starts out on the BPM side, buys Cordiant, starts creating CRM, makes a seamless transition from BPM to CRM in this story, makes a seamless transition from CRM to CX in this story, and makes a seamless transition from CX to customer engagement in this story. Their churn was almost nothing, right? Obviously, two very different narratives. Maybe, how would you, first of all, talk to the idea of the corporate narrative, then tell me how you would have fixed SAPs too.
Yeah. One of my favorite essays of all time is Marketing Myopia by Theodore Levitt. He wrote it for Harvard Business Review close to 50 years ago.
Wow.
And what he talks about, he talks about the railroad, so that kind of gives you a sense of the age of it. But it's timeless in the sense that he says most businesses don't know what business they're in. And they may think that they're in the business of delivering software, or they may think they're in the business of making sandwiches or whatever it is. But those aren't the outcomes that their customers are looking for. And so when you used to do the CRM watch list, one of the things I loved is that you always talked about it was an impact award, not a technology award. And what Jeff Gomez likes to say when he talks about the foundational narrative of a company is, what do you have to give to the world? What's your reason for existing? It's not to, help people, track their customers, right? It's not to do surveys. It's not to do point of sale systems. Those are the features and the functions of what you do, and that can change. So if you get to SAP, if you said, if SAP, their foundational narrative was, we're going to be your partner to help you manage all the key operations of your company, from your ERP to your sales to your marketing to your customer service to all these key functions. If that's the foundational narrative, there's a concept that we talk about with corporate narrative called embracing the narrative reversal, which is leaning into, if you make a mistake, leaning into it and using your corporate narrative as your safety net. And so if the CEO gets up and says, "Hey, on-premise is dead," if you're SAP and you're really clear with your corporate narrative, you say, "Our job is to do whatever we can to help you manage these key systems." One of the things we're doing is we know that on-premise, that a lot of you are considering, moving to the cloud. The cloud gives a lot of value. And so that was why we brought in success factors. We may have been a little premature in saying on-premise is dead. He's excited. He built a business. That's okay. But us, we're here just to help you. That's our foundational narrative. And so that's how you walk back, because that gives you something to walk back on. If you don't have that clear narrative, then the customers are saying, well, you just pulled the rug out from under us, or really all you think about is us as a bank to give you money so that you can continue to run your business.
So
right. So
talk to the 10 principles.
So we put together we actually put together a white paper, or I guess it's an ebook, because
right.
Jeff is verbose, about we call the 10 maxims for a successful corporate narrative. And we can share it in the notes or later, a link to it, or if anybody wants a copy, I'm happy to share it. But the idea here is that there are some principles, and these come from actually how some of the biggest entertainment franchises in the world have built their story worlds. Most people are familiar with Star Wars. There is a Bible on how to write or produce or create something in the Star Wars universe. There are rules.
Wow.
You can't just do anything with any character, and you can't, and there's certain things that you can't change. So we took the same principles for corporate narrative and apply them for entertainment franchises and apply it to companies. How do you tell good stories? And the first one is the story world rules overall. One of the challenges that big companies have is they operate in quarterly, results, or they bring somebody new in to lead, to be a leader, as and to change something, and they do it their way. Just because it worked somewhere else doesn't mean it'll work within this company, and so they have to, when you say the narrative rules overall, there are no individuals who are above it.
Let me throw something out to you on that, using that one. Okay, so one of the things about Salesforce that I always thought they were not strong on was the corporate narrative, because they have a very complex technology ecosystem and platform. It's got a lot of products. Each product has a story with it, but there's never been anything overarching that really explains it, except for the implied narrative around culture, right? But it's not explicit, really. So now that said, at the product level, the stories around the products are, they're uneven, of course, but generally they're pretty good expressions of the foundation and evolution of the product. How do you, without losing the effectiveness of those product narratives, how do you create a foundational corporate narrative that already has tons of sub-narratives? Basically, it's a corporate narrative that have tons of sub-narratives running underneath it without there actually being a corporate narrative to begin with.
It's no different than trying to create a story within an existing entertainment story world. Each product has to exist within that structure. And if it's not defined, then whoever creates the product comes up with the cool campaign, or comes up with a cool angle, or some du jour of whatever they're trying to do to make noise. On premise is dead, right?
But how do you elevate story to a corporate level? That's really the Salesforce.
It's the other way around, Paul. At the corporate level, you need to establish the tent poles and the guidelines, so that and the product stories need to align there. But look, if you put down tent poles, and if you need to change them, look, when Salesforce started, it was no software. Well, that's not that was more of a campaign than a corporate narrative. I think if I had to say what their foundational narrative is that you don't need to be in the software business. You don't need to be in the technology business. And so we're going to help you not be in the technology business, and you just let us do that, right? And so if that's how I would define it, then each product can sit there and say, how am I helping? How is that put into whatever the product is, and how am I helping support that corporate narrative?
So this might bring this to, it might be a tough question for them, not for you, because here's what I think the issue becomes. You have, let's call them reasonably well-crafted product narratives already. They exist. You've never really created an explicit corporate narrative. Again, to me, the implicit corporate narrative now is, for Salesforce has always been, even though it goes up and down in terms of their ability to facilitate this, which is we're a company that does more than just, power your CRM systems. Meaning, that they do good, they, all the things that they do, the culture, the whole thing. But that's not an explicit narrative for them. That's kind of how they're organized, and it's kind of the way they even dealt with their partner ecosystem. They have a highly organic, let's call it, ecosystem that they had to capture rather than, create an ecosystem that they crafted. They had to capture one that existed. It's kind of like the difference between a fan and a loyal customer, right? You have to create loyal customers. Fans are already there. You just have to capture their energy and focus them, right? So to speak. Salesforce has dozens to maybe even hundreds of product narratives. They don't have an overarching one. Do you accommodate the overarching one to the product narratives, or do you create the overarching one and then say, okay, product narratives, you can stay the same. You're going to have to change. You're going to have to go away and recreate. I mean, there's a lot of potential tough decisions in there. So how do you do that?
It's a great question, and I will challenge the premise of your statement.
Okay.
Salesforce does have a corporate narrative,
which is what?
Otherwise they wouldn't be still in business, because there's something that resonates with their customer base and with the world at large.
Culture.
They may not have it well articulated or identified, and which is why it doesn't always trickle down, so to speak, to the different product. So if I were coming in, I would actually, that would be the first step, is to say, why does Salesforce exist? What does it have to give to the world? Why has it been successful? And you talk to customers, you talk to partners, you talk to employees, you talk to, and then find elements. I'm sure there are elements of that in each one of the products, and then try to move the narratives for each one of the products to be more aligned with that corporate vision.
Well, look, I'm not, I absolutely agree with you. That's why I said earlier, it's implicit. It's not, they don't have anything explicit. And that said, it actually brings up something else. And again, I'm using Salesforce. I could speak to 15 other companies like this, or 50 other companies. I'm just using them because it's a company I've known since 1999, and I've seen their evolution from the beginning. And of course, have been a strong supporter of for most, as much for their, probably more fair. So at the last Dreamforce, I think they actually may have established something at the last Dreamforce. They had, of course, all the issues with layoffs and so on that hurt them badly, and it damaged Ohana and everything else, where people don't even think they have the right to use the word anymore. That said, and this is all happening while Gen AI is becoming kind of the thing and so on. So the central theme of Dreamforce, which resonated from the technology all the way through the general tenor, was trust, right? They built a trust layer into the technology, which is basically the guardrails around Gen AI and things like that, and also privacy and security protections. They basically were also by the if you look at the format of Mark's speech and the way they handle it, was very different than in the past. They were reestablishing trust in the company, and they succeeded. Now, let me ask you this. I thought that was highly successful as far as how it worked thematically, and said so. They reestablished trust in the company. It basically was a stake that went all the way through, from the very top all the way through to the ground. Is that a corporate narrative? Could that be turned into a corporate narrative? Is that is that their history becoming explicit? I mean, what is that?
Let me ask you a question. What made you think that it worked? What made you think that
I mean,
what elements of it convinced you that there was more trust there?
Okay, well, there's twofold here. There's one, me personally, and then there's me observationally, which is me as analyst. Me personally was the coherence of it was absolute. I believed it, as simple as that. I literally just believed it. Plus, technologically, it was one of the best pieces of technology I'd seen in that regard when it came to establishing true guardrails around Gen AI. It wasn't just talk; it was genuine. There's genuine value in the way they sculpted the architecture and with how they worked it into the platform and so on and so forth. So there was all of those things, and then Mark's speech and the way that they execute on the speech made me think this combination of I believe you and this is really smart. And then, of course, being an analyst, I asked a lot of people what they thought, and almost everybody universally went, yeah, that was really, really well done. And I do believe them. And I trust them more than I did before I came to the conference.
So the answer to your question is the core element of a corporate narrative is your foundational narrative. What do you have to give to the world? And we're your trusted partner for managing the technology piece of your business. And so what they did was pare down the rhetoric to the core, back to we're not your family, we're not your best friend, we are your partner, and you can trust that we're going to deliver that value, right? So the Ahana stuff is a little bit of a distraction. Not that, look, they've done an amazing job with community, and we can talk about community and collective journey, and maybe that's a whole other topic.
Yep.
But what they did was go back to their core value proposition when they said no software, which is trust us. We're going to manage all this stuff. You manage your business, we're going to manage your technology, trust us. And so this was actually a return to the core of the corporate narrative. And you have to differentiate corporate narrative from campaigns. You can have a new campaign every year. It's just a different element of the story that you want to tell. Maybe this year it's all about, AI, and, one time it was about, endpoints. I have Google Glass, and it's amazing what you can do when you bring the technology to the endpoint. That's a campaign. But the core piece of it is when Mark Benioff gets on the stage at Dreamforce in 2016 and shows a technician fixing an X-ray machine using Google Glass to look at the schematics for the machine. That's still not even possible. But he showed you a vision what's possible, and you trusted that he's looking out for the future of your technology.
Yep. My way of putting that from that standpoint is a true visionary, a genuine visionary, is someone who presents the way things can be, and you say, I can see myself as part of that. If you don't say that, then it's science fiction.
And I trust that you can do that. Meaning, there are people who can just come up and say, hey, yeah, we could do this. And you'll sit there and say, really? But Salesforce has a history of delivering not on everything they say, because if you went back to every Dreamforce keynote and said, did they do what they say in the keynote? The answer is no, but they did move the needle forward each time.
It would be the year 3100 if that was the case, if they did everything.
Right. So the answer is the corporate narrative is there. And maybe they strayed from it a little bit. Maybe they got too many other voices were trying to change some of those core elements or distract from the core elements. And so when you know what those are, that's your rubric. When you come out with the campaign, hey, does this align with our corporate narrative, or are we trying to change something? And in which case, maybe you have to question whether that's the right path.
All right, one final question before we have to close. How are the Mets going to get out of their rut?
Time.
Which
Probably,
means what?
2026, 2027, maybe.
No, I think it'll be. I'm more optimistic about them than you are.
I think that the Mets are they have some really great young pitching, and that that's just a matter of getting experience. They got a great bullpen. And they can hit. They're just not doing it right now. So they're not. I know that. Wait, who was the football coach who said you're exactly as good as your record, or what was this?
I don't know.
Bill Parcells.
Oh, okay. How could I not know that?
You're as good as your record, or whatever. But I think the Mets are better than their record. And
I agree. Totally. Okay, one last sub question to that. Actually, extend Pete Alonso or let him go. I know it's tough.
Extend him.
Okay, we're definitely aligned.
He's a core player, and I think, look, if the Mets saying we're not even going to be competitive for 2 or 3 years, let him go. But I think the Mets can be competitive.
I agree. I'm a Yankees fan.
And I'm a huge Alonso fan.
We've turned it down. We've turned it around this year from last year already, and I suspect we're settling into kind of a rhythm now, which is really, really a good rhythm. People are performing way better than expected. People are performing as expected. Those who aren't performing as was expected are now, like Judge, now beginning to find their groove again. And we're still not even up to full strength yet without Cole, right? So, and half our bullpen, and our bullpen's already got the second best ERA in the majors. So, and it's a different bullpen than last year. So we're in pretty good place. That said, I like the Mets, and only in the World Series would I want the Mets to lose if they were playing the Yankees, right? Beyond that, I'm rooting for the Mets. So there's literally only one circumstance.
I've been to the only World Series game that the Mets beat the Yankees.
2000.
I was there.
Wow, that was what was that, the third game?
Third game.
Yeah, it was the third game. I remember because it went 5. And next year we had that really weird fluke, right, with Juan Gonzalez's hit that if Derek Jeter had been literally a foot somewhere else, he would have caught.
And Jenny has been to 2 Mets World Series winning games, so she should be invited to every game that the Mets play in the World Series.
Amen. And also to the extension discussions with Pete Alonso.
Right.
And so, all right, Alan, thank you. You know you're coming back, right?
Absolutely.
And you're already a co-host on another PPN show, which is Whispered Insights. Why don't you give everybody let's call it a 1-minute summary of Whispered Insights, and we'll sign off after that.
So Whispered Insights actually aligns with what we were talking about in terms of what's the role of humans in terms of dealing with the future. And it's dealing with complexity, and leaders have to have tough decisions, and it's not always they don't always have internal resources or that they can either rely on or have the skill set to have the objectivity to help them make better decisions. So Whispered Insights, I think, is something that organizations, look, management consulting has been around for a long time. I think it's a little broken. I think best practices now exist in LLMs, so you don't need best practices. You actually need more insights.
So, and you're on today, right?
That was yesterday.
Oh, yesterday. That's right. It was yesterday at 2 p.m., I believe.
2 p.m. Eastern.
Right. Okay.
So that show time machine.
The show will be up on both the PPN YouTube channel and on PPN website, which is playersproductions.network at in about 2 hours. They'll both be up. Also, how do people get a hold of you?
You could. I'm still on that thing they call X or Twitter, just at Berkson, and LinkedIn is probably the best way to find me. Okay. I'm pretty active there, and I'm pretty responsive.
All right. Well, thank you, sir. And I think with that, let's say goodbye to everybody. We'll see you soon.
Mashed up and broken into two. I didn't know I was pretty till I took a look at you and I'm rolling. Yeah, I'm still rolling. Baby, there ain't nothing I can lose and I sure got the blues rolling. Hey!
This has been a Players Productions Network digital broadcast.